In today's session, he brings his rich and varied experience. May I request you, sir, to take over the session?
Hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. So, basically, very often I am asked the question how to prepare for current affairs, how, especially for the civil services. So, the short answer to that, which I have been trying to repeatedly give and send messages about, whether it is in the yearbook that Magro publishes annually, or it is in the book which was about concepts in current affairs, that basically for current affairs there is no book you can mug, there is no textbook that you can read. Any books including mine are at best some broad guide, reminders, aid memoirs. The only one and only preparation for current affairs is to read newspapers, magazines, to be curious, to be aware of your surroundings, and to ask questions. It is just a question of absorbing the world around you and being curious about it and knowing why, what, etc. I'll give you an example. When you think of the space program, Indian space program, does the word Thumba ring a bell in your mind? What is the importance of Thumba? Similarly, does the name Vikram Sarabhai ring a bell in your mind? What is the importance of Vikram Sarabhai? Why was he in the news recently? Are you aware that it was his 50th death anniversary in December of 2021, and which is why he was in the news? So basically, this is something that no book can actually collect and collate. Uh, the whole world around you can't be collected and collated into a book. So you have to read, you have to be aware, you have to ask questions. You have to be generally interested. It is not that you can mug it and go and answer a question on current affairs. So please read your newspapers. You may well say that, well, we have only 4 months or 5 months left for the examination. So, what good is reading newspaper 5 months? Well, yeah, you are right, because you should have been reading newspapers from the day you sort of came into high school. And but nonetheless, it's never too late to start, and especially those of you who are taking the exam for the second or third time, I hope that the last 1 year, at least 1.5 years, you have been reading newspapers and you have been absorbing what you are reading. Second thing is that a lot of you read newspapers and try to make notes. Well, making notes is no harm if it adds to your memory, if it acts as a absorbent. But if you think that you're going to come back to those notes and mug them, that's not at all likely. All right, because you'll be under too much pressure and you can't mug 1 years of notes that you take it from newspapers. So when you read newspapers, try to absorb the item. Try to ask questions about it then, and if you ask questions around it, then naturally you're likely to remember a lot more. For you people, it is very easy relative to our generation, because you can always go to the net and ask those questions and you'll get answers. We didn't have that facility, and yet I think a lot of us try to be aware of what's happening and the why and wherefores, if I may say so, of the world. So please read your newspapers carefully. Please see what are the items that are likely to get converted into questions. So, UPSC will never ask you a political question, not even as innocent a question as who won the last, say, UP election. They will never ask you that. So there is no, that has value only in sense of at least knowing who won. It may be of value in an interview or something like that. But you're not going to get a question on any political issue, especially a controversial political issue. So that you'll always get questions of something interesting, something out of the way, something that should grab your attention and you should know about. It may appear to be minor, it may carry only one column in the newspaper, but it can be important. And to that extent, books on current affairs like mine will help, because they'll give you a guide on what things to stop over, what things to mull over, what are the ongoing issues that we must know about. So recently, we have had some controversy over the FCRA issue. So you should know about the FCRA Act. As a matter of fact, I am going to speak a little more detailed about it today. You must have some kind of idea of what the FCRA Act is, when it was enacted, why it was enacted, what problems it creates for, say, NGOs, and why the government has had to put such sections in place. What is the government's point of view on this? You must understand that. Now, if you overlook that entire issue, then you're not. It's not going to help you. So that is what I say. That basically, see, even if you get into the civil services, your success will depend on awareness of the world around you. You can't just be reading only your files. You have to read your files, you have to be good at them, but you can't only be reading your files and be successful at your jobs. You have to, read the circumstances, you have to be aware of what's happening, what are the power equations, who's, sort of a mission maker, who's a good guy. You have to know these things. Take the example of an IAS officer, for example, when he goes into a district, he or she goes into a district. Now, if you go into a district like Ajmer, which is a district that I know, then at some point you're going to pick up that there is a very first day you will know that you have a sub tehsil called Nasirabad, and maybe it's become a tehsil now, and that in that sub tehsil or tehsil there is a village called Ramsar, and in that village Ramsar, there has been some history of communal tensions from time to time. This is something that you have to absorb. Somebody is going to tell it to you, and when somebody mentions it in the passing, you have to just keep it and internalize it. Not only internalize it, then you have to understand ki when was the last such tension, what are the normal causes for that tension, who are the leading people in the village, who are the leaders of their respective groups, who will bring sanity to both the groups, and you can talk to them and try to make a peace committee or try to control the tension. So you have to know these things. No book will give you this. No district gazetteer, no handing over note, taking over note will give you all this, because this is too detailed and nobody can foresee the requirement for it. But when you go in tour in Tehsil, the Tehsil of Nasirabad, when you talk to the Tehsildar, when you talk to the local people, then you have to pick up these little, snippets of information which can be critical for knowing what is happening in your district. And if something goes wrong, how do you control it? And who are the people who will help you control it? Who are the troublemakers who you need to, deal with and put them, away for a day or two so that they don't create trouble there. So all these things, can somebody write in a book? No, it's not possible. But it all depends on how much of a blotting paper you are for information, how much information you can absorb, how curious you are about asking questions, backward linkages, why does this happen, what are the causes, what is the initial start of this issue, you know so you have to understand those things, and then we can call you a person who's aware. When you walk into an interview, see, a lot of things you will read in newspapers, in GK books, including in India yearbook, which you may think, "Ki, why is this here? Why is this? What? Why is this important? How does it matter which is the highest mountain in the world?" Well, it doesn't matter directly. Nobody's going to ask you that name the highest mountain in the world. But if in an interview, a conversation crops up on the Himalayas, and suddenly if somebody realizes in the interview board that you don't even know that Mount Everest is the highest mountain in amongst the Himalayas or in the world, then naturally the interview board will form a very poor impression about you. So that is why those little snippets of information are very important to you, and you must know about them. You must absorb them, as I keep saying. So some of these you can learn. Some of the static information you will get from books like India Yearbook, 2022 now. But some of you'll also get some current affair briefs. But really speaking, for current affairs, books are at best a guide, some kind of a reminder aid memorial, but ultimately it depends on you, your ability to read, absorb, ask questions, be curious, and really understand the issue so that it remains with you without you having to go back to that notebook to try to mug it. You can't mug current affairs. So that's where I stop by saying how you approach the current affairs issue. I will now pick up two examples of issues currently which you might know about. So I was stressing the fact that you must know the concept behind it. Why is it happening? Why is it not happening? Let's look at the farm laws as a first example. The farm laws were withdrawn recently, as you know. They were enacted. There was a protest by farmers who sat on the roads for a year, and then the government finally withdrew those three laws. Now, why did the laws come into place in the first place, and why were they withdrawn? Is issue that you ought to know. So the background is as follows. In pre-independence India, if all your farm produce was sold to the local village trader. So if some of you might have seen a very very old movie, older than even my generation, called Mother India, there they depicted very well how a village trader, the only rich man in the village, actually exploits the farmers because there is nowhere else that the farmer can go except that trader to sell their grain to or to borrow money from if when they needed the money to buy food grains or buy fertilizer till the crop came. So the character in that movie is called Kanhaiya Lal. So you could only go to Kanhaiya Lal and nobody else. So come independence, in the 19 I think 1954-55, most states enacted what is known as the Agriculture Produce Marketing Committee Acts. Now, what this mandated was that all trade of food grain and vegetables, etc., agriculture produce, would be conducted only in a mandi. So, if you're a trader buying for trade, then you had to be a mandi trader to be indulging in that trade, and these mandis were regulated by marketing committees. Uh, the result was that and the law provided for various safeguards like auctions and maximum of commissions that the traders could take, etc. So theoretically, you created a framework where you could go into a marketplace. In smaller mandis, there'd be 20, 30 traders. In larger mandis like Jaipur, you could have a couple of hundred traders. You could go to a market and actually find whichever trader is paying you the best per price or giving you the best terms. You could actually sell the produce to him, and there also he's only the person who's actually auctioning it to the real buyer. Or very often if you go to a mandi even today, you will see that as a matter of fact, that's part of growing up and part of being aware, stepping into a mandi and seeing how the trades take place. So very often you will see live auctions on fruits, vegetables, etc., going on, and so theoretically the farmer got the best price. So this is a huge improvement from the time that was depicted in Mother India, Kanhaiya Lal, because suddenly you had a body of traders who you could deal with. The downside of this was that it created an oligopoly. So as I told you, smaller mandis could have as few as 20 traders, and even amongst the 100 traders or 200 traders in Jaipur or 400 traders in Jaipur, they'll be specialists. So some will be doing only vegetable and fruits, some will be doing only food grains, etc. So in any case, the issue was that you could only sell to a trader, and so traders amongst themselves could actually fix some kind of price limits on not to buy at a price higher than that. Now, part of that problem was met with by the government by creating the structure of the minimum support prices for the farmer. That if the traders drove down the price below a certain level, then of course government said we'll buy the price at this minimum support price. But still, the for the larger number of grains, because MSP supports only 22 crops, this problem remained that you were selling to a few select traders. For decades now, a debate has gone on in India that this mandi license system should be changed and liberalized further. Why should a mandi license be limited to only one mandi? Why couldn't I ask, say, for an all Rajasthan license so that all Rajasthan traders could trade in any mandi they wanted, especially once the IT came? So suddenly, the few thousand traders in Rajasthan, for example, who were divided in its 246 mandis, could then be on the trading platform, and the farmer could actually then have a much larger group of people, to trade with or sell his produce to. The other alternative suggested was that you de-license this and let anybody who wants to buy outside the mandi also buy and keep the mandi systems working. So if outside guys try to exploit you, don't have to sell to him. You go back to the mandi and buy. And if you find that somebody from outside is paying you a higher price, then sell to him and be done with it. So liberalize it to the extent that no trading license was required at all, and the farmer was free to sell to anybody he or she wishes. Now, in theory, this produces a much larger buyer market, and this is economically efficient. So, this is a pro market reform that you have come from 1 to 20 traders or 40 traders, go from 40 to 1600 traders, or go to an unlimited number of traders who would be able to buy farm produce, and hopefully, this will get the farmers some better price. So this was one issue that had been debated for decades in India, but it hadn't. Nobody actually was able to do it because the traders in the mandis had become a strong lobby, and they used to oppose it. In 2004, when I was Agriculture Secretary Rajasthan, we actually passed this reform in the cabinet, but it had to be withdrawn because the traders of Rajasthan across Rajasthan went on a strike. So, because of traders' opposition to further liberalization, well, this is not surprising. Any group of people who have a privilege will always resist uh, more people coming into the cohort which has those privileges. They will not like more competition, so they will oppose it. So the traders had been opposing this reform. Now, the second thing was that because MSP only uh, covers 22 items, some food grains, some oil seeds, some dalhan. So the second problem was that what how does a farmer diversify? It is well known that if a farmer grows vegetables or fruits, his or her returns are likely to be higher than on, say, wheat, uh, especially at the MSP. Now, the farmer couldn't diversify really into vegetables and fruit, which are cash crops and can probably give him higher income, for the very simple reason that he didn't have the risk-taking capacity. The risk was that if he grew tomatoes and the market for tomatoes fell, then his tomatoes would rot and nobody would buy them. At least wheat has the advantage that it won't rot, it will get sold in 4 months, 5 months, 3 months, and there's an MSP. So farmer was reluctant to diversify into vegetables and fruits because there was a risk involved. Suppose the everybody in that area decided, this has happened ad nauseum in the case of sugarcane in UP and Maharashtra, that suddenly everybody because there were very good prices this year. Next year, everybody grows sugarcane, and then the prices fall sharply, and then all the farmers suffer. So that risk-taking capacity was not there. So there was for many decades now, India has debated this issue that should we do contract farming. Contract farming is that if I am a trader or a company, say I am manufacturer of a ketchup, a tomato ketchup, and I would go into an area and do a contract with a farmer, with a group of farmers separately, saying that I'll buy your tomato produce at certain rupees a kilo. So that it becomes, for the farmer, it becomes some kind of MSP. With one difference, that farmer is also bound by that contract, to sell it to the manufacturer if the prices of tomatoes go higher than the contracted price. So it was seen by many economists as a win-win situation that farmer would get a minimum price would not fall below that. So he wasn't taking risk of getting zero. He was taking a calculated decision that he would at least get 4 rupees a kilo, say for tomato, or 5 rupees a kilo for tomato. And on the other hand, for the manufacturer of ketchup, uh, he wasn't worried that his tomato price might either be 50 paisa or 5 rupees or 25 rupees if there was a shortage. And naturally, for a manufacturer of ketchup, any sharp variation in tomato prices is difficult to absorb because how much of it can he pass on to the consumer without affecting sales? So it was supposed to be a win-win situation that we should do contract farming, and that was also an issue that was being debated for many years. The third issue that was being debated for many years in the agriculture sector was that we had a monopolies MRTPC. What is that act called? Monopolies Act. I'll just tell you the exact name of the act, which Essential Commodities Act. It's the Essential Commodities Act. So Essential Commodities Act basically prohibited storage of certain items which were notified by government beyond a certain capacity, because when we were really short of food grains and vegetables in the 50s and 60s and 70s, at that time government didn't want traders to hoard and profit here. So it was an anti-hoarding measure when there was a period of shortage in India. You know, you are too young to know, but if you have read a bit of history, you'll know that in the 1960s we had severe droughts across India, and so we were very short of food grain. We had to import food grain from USA under the PL 480 program. So basically, there was this law came into being to prevent hoarding by and profiteering by traders. Now we are no longer short of most food grains; we are actually surplus, and in a sense, this is not a very efficient way of controlling prices. The most efficient way of controlling prices actually is to increase production. Now we have increased production, and so normally there's not a very unreasonable price hike in most commodities. So now what therefore the impact of the Essential Commodities Act is that it has discouraged the setting up of processing, of cold chains, of making things available non-seasonally. So every year we hear the debate that onion prices have gone up high. But onion prices are bound to go high in off season. Onion is a seasonal crop. So naturally, off if you buy mangoes in winters, you have to pay a very hefty price for them. So similarly, if you buy onions off season, then you might have to pay a higher price. So basically, but if you had a cold chain, if you had cold storages, etc., then maybe this price variation could be if not eliminated, at least reduced. You could perhaps do a more averaging might actually your prices might be better. At the same time, if I could keep commodities in cold storages or store food grains, wheat, etc., beyond a certain limit, I would also set up storage spaces. I would also set up cold chains for vegetables, etc. So there was no investment taking on these activities, which are very normal across the world, especially in the developed world. The result was that in off season you always faced higher prices, and in the season you got very low prices. So in the off season the consumer was adversely affected. In the peak season the farmer was adversely affected. So farmer, if I could store a lot of say food grain, then even in peak season I would buy and keep it and hope to sell it later at a better price. So this value addition by in processing, cold storage, normal storage was what was no investment was taking place because of this Essential Commodities Act, and actually it became an anti-farmer measure because then in peak season farmer couldn't get a proper price because nobody was allowed to store the product. So even for decades, this has also been debated that fine, you are protecting the middle class consumer in cities by getting him things on cheap prices. But what about the farmer? Why is farmer being made to lose? He is the poorest of the poor in any case. So this was the third issue that has been debated in India for decades. Now, what the government did about a year and a quarter back was it took on these three issues and made amendments in the relevant acts. So it actually provided. So I won't go into details or sections of the acts because that's not important. But what it did was it provided for outside mandi purchases, so that the monopoly of the trader is diluted to some extent. It allowed for contract farming and pricing, and it liberalized the various provisions of the Essential Commodities Act. And it stated that Essential Commodities Act could only be invoked in case of war or extreme emergencies, etc. So, normally speaking, people like me would have expected that the farmers would welcome this. So we were all very surprised when actually farmers opposed it. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a piece in Indian Express last year, which was titled "The Trader's Voice," where I pointed out that farmers should be applauding these bills, especially the dilution of Essential Commodities Act. They should be asking for it, well, actually it is of benefit to them. But obviously, we didn't understand the full picture because farmers had a different take on the change laws. And the farmers' take was that if you destroy the mandi system, then mandis will become unviable. They will die out over a period of time. The big companies, multinationals, or big companies of India like ITC, etc., or they should name other people also, would come into the picture by would actually assist in the demise of the multi system by offering very good prices to farmers in the first few years. And when the mandi system was become completely decrepit or had died out, then they would start exploiting the farmers. So this was the broad understanding of the farmer, and the farmer's agitation, to my mind, was based on this understanding. Now, again, in my opinion, the understanding of the farmers was incorrect because creating a monopoly in agriculture produce over such a large country is not easy at all. Actually, it is nearly impossible. But nonetheless, that was the farmers' point of view, and they protested. So the government has, in a democratic country, government listens to people, so they have withdrawn the bills. So this is what I have to tell you about the farm laws. Now, the important thing, part of this reason for telling you this about the farm laws is to tell you about the farm laws and sensitize you on the issues. But more importantly, it is to make you aware that when you read this entire story of farm laws and its repeal and the strike and the roadblocks, did you people go back and check why they were enacted? What is the impact of them? What was the logic when they were enacted? Laws which seemed to many of us to be so outdated today, why were they relevant at the time when they were enacted? So that is the curiosity part, that is the absorption part, that is the general awareness part. So basically, when you look at an issue like this, please try to go back, understand why it happened. Why is it? What has changed now that we are saying it should not happen? Please try to be aware, and if you are aware of that, then you cannot forget the issues because you have understood it, you have internalized it, then you will not forget it. But if you try to mug the amendments of the farm laws section by section, you may be successful, but there will be no question which will require you to write a section by section amendment of the farm laws. Nor can you understand, really speaking, what the whole picture is if you just read section by section amendment. You really have to understand the broad picture, and I think I have just what I have tried to do right now is to try to make you understand that broad picture. So please draw the second important lesson to draw from this talk is on farm laws, that please try to understand the why and wherefores of everything. And once you've understood that, then it will remain with you. You will never forget. You will not need to mug, and you'll be able to answer questions on it, whether in the GSM papers or in interviews. The second thing that I'll speak to you about today is the FCRA, the Foreign Currency Regulation Act, which has also been in the news because the government recently cancelled or refused to extend the FCRA approvals for some thousands of sort of entities. Now, what is FCRA and why was it enacted and when was it enacted? So, actually speaking, the FCRA came into being in 1976. So, it's not a new law. It's been there on our statute books since more than 40 years, for almost 42 years. Now, why was this law enacted? So it was enacted because we were a poor country. We are still not a very rich country. And people could, with money, influence many activities on the social or religious front through their sheer money power. Was countries in the developed world were, several times richer than us and still are several times richer than us. So with money power, they could influence the social discourse, the political discourse in our country. So what you did was you didn't ban it because some of this money came in for honest purpose, good purpose. So you didn't ban it. What you did was you tried to regulate it, to see where it was going, who was giving it, what is the purpose it was being used, and whether it was being used for the purpose for which it was alleged to have been given. So that's why the FCRA Act came into being in 1976. And then circumstances changed, and over a period of time, people discovered some difficulties, some loopholes, and so the government amended the Act quite extensively in 2010. So again, that is not new. It's 12 years old. The 2010, the government amended the act, and today, till very recently, what we were working with was the FCRA Act as amended up to 2010. Now, in the last 10 years, some more issues have arisen, some more clarifications are required, and some more loopholes have been discovered, some more difficulties have been identified, and so the government carried out further amendments in the Act in 2020. Now, some of these amendments have, come in for criticism, and some of them are also in the Supreme Court. So, I will just briefly sensitize you on what these amendments are. So, basically, the 2010 Act prohibited, election candidates or judges or MLAs or employees of corporations controlled by government or editor, owner, or publisher of newspapers from accepting foreign contributions. Now, this was quite specific. Now, what the government has done is it has brought it under one umbrella, saying that if you are a public servant, and public servant is well defined, then you cannot accept foreign contributions. That's, I think, a very reasonable change, because if I am in an employee of the government, if I am in the IAS and doing policy work, I shouldn't be accepting foreign contributions, even in the name of a alleged NGO, because that NGO could very well be backed by a corporation, funded by a corporation who has worked with me. So naturally, public servants should not be allowed to accept foreign contributions. Then second thing is that the second change is that it specifically prohibits transfer of funds to other organizations. So if I'm running an organization in India, I'm approved under the FCRA for receiving the funds. If I receive those funds from foreign contribution, then I shouldn't pass it on to other organizations. Now I can tell you why this was essential. This was needed because in many times I became the front organization. I was fronting for other organizations. The result was that while I would carry out no activity which fell foul of the FCRA Act, the organization who received money from me in turn and which was carrying out its activities, it could do certain activities which are prohibited, political activities, for example, prohibited under the FCRA Act. So naturally, you don't want your political discourse to be affected by foreign money, and it was impossible to keep track of the number of organizations that I transferred money to, because I could transfer the money to hundreds of organizations. So therefore, what government in the 2010 Act, the government said, please inform us, take our prior permission before such transfers. But it became so huge and so large, the transfers in numbers, that the government now felt that it was just prohibiting it. That if a subsidiary organization really needs funds, it must then it is FCRA registered, so it might as well get funds directly from the donor organization. Why should that be routed through a front organization? So that change has been made. Now, in this, the difficulty on the other side expressed by the NGOs, etc., is that there are many small NGOs which get funded by mother NGOs, all right, and therefore it is difficult for individual smaller NGOs to do all the compliances of the FCRA Act, and therefore the mother NGO funds them, and it is becoming now impossible for smaller NGOs to function. So that is the other side of the story. Now, the third thing change that has happened is that the 2000 Act said that your administrative expenses should not be more than 50% of the contribution received. This has been reduced to 20%. Now, this also, to my mind, appears to be a little logical, because, really speaking, there's no donor will genuinely allow somebody to spend half the contribution on administrative expenses. Actually, what was happening was that in the garb of administrative expenses, a lot of wrong activities prohibited under the FCR Act otherwise were taking place. So people were paying for litigation of a political nature, etc., from their so-called administrative expenses. So when you received money, you showed the activities which are prohibited under the FCRA Act as administrative expenses, and therefore this amendment government thought was necessary and has carried it out. Then another change was that your major recipient account in which you receive your money should be with the SBI. Now, some people have found it very difficult, saying, "Yeah, why should I bank only with SBI?" But the government's answer is that I'm not asking you to bank with SBI. I'm asking you to receive the funds with SBI. From there, you can transfer it to any scheduled bank from which you want to operate. But I wanted to come to one bank, so at least I can keep track of that money. Where is it come from? Who has given it? And where is it gone? So only one extra step is required, that all money comes to the SBI account, and from the SBI account, you can, if you are banking through HDFC, you can transfer that money to HDFC Bank and carry on your transactions. The next amendment was that that the office bearers and the uh, chief promoters, or whatever, board of the of the recipient organization, must keep their Aadhaar identities. Now, people are finding this to be very intrusive, but again, I don't understand the reason, because identification of the person is very important. We know of cases where people have, declared, say, Ram Singh as the chief executive, and when you actually check, when there is an inquiry against that NGO, you found that there was no Ram Singh ever working there. So basically, people have been misusing this ability to give a name without an identity, in doing fictitious names, presenting fictitious names in front of the government. So I think it's fair enough that anybody is a chief executive, or anybody is, office bearer in an NGO. If I claim to be office bearer in an NGO today, then I must at least satisfy the government that I am the person who I claim to be. We do that every day routinely. We do it when we want a driving license, when we want a passport. We do confirm our identity by giving, when we want a mobile connection, we confirm our identity by giving our Aadhaar numbers. Then the 2000 Act said that your suspension of, if an inquiry is being going on and prima facie something against you is found, then suspension of your license can be there for 180 days. That has been increased to 360 days, because again, it was not always very easy to finish an inquiry within 180 days. Now, The basically the of for the thousands of cancellations or non-renewals done, most of them I can assure you, because when I was the Union Home Secretary, similar thing happened. Most of these cancellations or non-renewals will be for non-compliance with the various provisions of the Act, non-compliance of secretarial provisions of the Act. So if you're expected to file a return, you didn't file a returns. If you're expected to give an annual report of audited accounts, you don't give audited accounts. So naturally, if there is a law of the land, you need to comply with it. So non-compliance of law will naturally lead to either cancellation or non-renewal. If you don't give me the returns that you're required to give me, if you don't give your audited accounts to me, how can you expect your license to be renewed? So, really speaking, if you look at most of these cases, this non-renewal and cancellation will be for non-compliance with the sectorial provisions of the Act, and there will be very few where there are serious charges of misuse of funds or misapplication of funds. So that is all that I have to say about the FCRA Act. Again, I will draw your attention to the fact that I have just not, I have, tried to make you understand the background of why the FCRA Act came. I have also tried to explain to you why these amendments were carried out, what is the reasoning given, rationale given by the government for carrying out these amendments. To my mind, knowing that and understanding that is more important than knowing the amendment itself, as important, if not more important, because once you know why this was done, and it's very difficult to forget what the amendment was. But if you simply just mug or memorize the amendment, then your chances of you forgetting it are very high. In any case, when you go into an interview, if you don't understand what you're talking about, then the interview board will catch you out. So, a current affairs or general knowledge preparation is also with a view to also being able to withstand scrutiny in an interview. So, when you prepare for GK and current affairs by increasing your awareness, by being more absorbent, you're actually not only preparing to answer the GSM paper, you're also preparing for the interview. And on a lighter side, you're also fitter for drawing room conversations. You don't appear ignorant, you appear smart, you appear intelligent, you appear knowledgeable. So that's all that I have to say. I think we are high on time. We have about 14-15 minutes for questions. So, Srikant, would you like to put up the questions on behalf of the students, please? Hello.
Yes. So, sir, we have a few questions. Divya Prakash
Hmm.
wants to ask you, sir, how to prepare current affairs from CSE personality test interview perspective? What is the panel looking for in the candidate when they ask current affairs question?
So I think I've already answered that in my longish sort of talk. I've already said that when you're taking this, when you're increasing your awareness and you're satisfying your curiosity, you're in a sense preparing for the interview, because then you know what you're talking about. But since we are on the topic of interviews, let me also tell you that other than the fact that in an interview the people are smart enough to judge whether your knowledge is bookish or your knowledge is genuinely born of inquiring mind. And so other than that, what they are looking for is a lot of sincerity in your approach and purpose. So they love candidates who appear to be sincere about what they are doing and what they are talking. Again, it is very easy to make out for an interviewer when a person is mouthing things which he or she don't really mean. So basically, the impression that you need to convey in an interview board is that you are generally a well aware and well rounded person. And that is what, so when you start reading around, when you start asking questions, when you start going into background, when you start understanding concepts, then you become that well-rounded personality, and you are good for an interview.
Thank you, sir. Next question is from Harshita Sharma. What measures should be undertaken to increase private participation in agriculture sector in light of farm laws repeal and Essential Commodities Act withdrawal?
So all agriculture today is in the private sector. There are no collective farms, except there are hardly any government farms left. Maybe Suratgarh farm is one that is left. But if she means huge private investment by big companies, then in the current status of our agriculture and our laws, that will not be possible, because private investments in agriculture will only come when land holdings are substantially large. Now, we don't have large holdings. We actually have, average holding is less than 2 acres a family. So we are not going to get any large farmlands of few hundred acres to attract private investment. I might also tell you, now I don't want to go into the detail much, but of course I could, that the Zamindari Abolition Act of 1950s, again, in various states, prohibited, for reasons that I will not explain now, but for very logical reasons, it prohibited leasing of farmland. So, other than the fact that nobody is allowed, and there is also a land sharing law. So, other than the fact that there is nobody has large holdings, you can't buy land and become a large landholder. You can't even lease and become a large landholder of leasehold land. So therefore, huge private investment is actually very unlikely in the country. The only possibility was in the downstream activities like cold chains and storages and all, which is taking place, but which would have taken place at a faster pace if the farm laws had come into being. But unfortunately, especially the Essential Commodities Act, but unfortunately that has gone on the back burner, I think, for the time being.
Thank you, sir. So Rohit Mishra has a question relevant to the current state of affairs. He wants to know India's stance on Ukraine, Russia, and NATO conflict. Where should we lean if the war started?
So I am not an expert on foreign affairs, but India is in a very difficult situation, because India has very close and warm ties with Russia. We actually have a treaty with them. It's called the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, signed in 1971. And at the same time, we are currently very having a very good relationship with the USA, because we do a lot of trade with them. We import a lot of arms from them, so we have a very warm relationship there also, and it will be difficult to annoy either. So, really speaking, foreign policy is real politics. There is morality is a secondary issue. It is real politics, where the country's interests lie. And currently, to my mind, the country's interests would lie in trying to be as neutral and balanced and nuanced as they can be.
Thank, thank you, sir. We have another question from Ijahat Mohammed Husud. Why contribution of agriculture has decreased and why in agricultural policies are failing in India and what can be done?
So, declining, declining sort of contribution of agriculture to GDP is natural and inevitable and should be welcomed, because it means that your other sectors of your economy are doing very well. So as an economy grows, naturally the share of agriculture will contract as a percentage of GDP. In absolute numbers, it may increase, it may become substantial, but as a percentage of GDP, it will contract, because your services are now 65%, your manufacturing is about 25%. So naturally, agriculture is only about 17-18%, 12% including animal husbandry, 18%. So basically, that's something that should be welcomed. It is not something to worry about. Uh, in most developed countries, the contribution of agriculture to GDP is 3% or 4%. So that's not something that we need to worry about. As a matter of fact, we need to welcome it. We should not remain forever only a farming nation. Then we'll always remain poor. So that is the short point. Now, what we need to do actually is that if agriculture produces only 17% of GDP, agriculture and allied activities, but there are 50% of the people, or 55% of the people dependent on their agricultural income, then naturally those people are very poor. Those per capita incomes become very low. So what we need to be doing is, as most Western countries have done, that we need to be paying attention to urbanization. We need to grow more jobs in urban sectors. We need to move people to cities where there are more, software firms, more startups, more manufacturing firms, and where they get absorbed, so their per capita incomes increase, and at the same time, the pressure of population on agriculture reduces in proportion to its contribution to GDP. So today, actually, if only 17% of India's population was dependent on agriculture GDP, then the farmer would be at least 3 to 4 times better off than he or she is today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we have one question regarding from Raj Sekran. He's asking, my question is regarding science and technology related current affairs. Does the trend follow this year too on questions related to healthcare due to pandemic's ingress? That there will be more health science tech questions in the exam because of pandemic.
Difficult to say. UPSC papers are difficult to predict, and they don't follow a broad pattern in any case. I think they do it deliberately, not following a pattern. So I think naturally, pandemic is now partly it's dying out, partly it's old news. So pandemic related questions may actually not be there at all. But health is something which is so important and crucial and critical to India that on health there can always be questions. But yes, on the whole, I would feel that it is uh, whatever questions came because of the pandemic are not likely to, that pattern is not likely to repeat because that's happened. That's something in the past. It's hardly anything that is current.
Thank you, sir. So Supriya wants to know what should be the approach to write opinion-based questions.
No, so basically, everybody is entitled to a reasonably different opinion. You can't be unreasonable, you can't be an extremist, but everybody is entitled to his or her opinion as long as he or she can defend that opinion, can give logical reasons why that opinion, why she is of that opinion. So basically, nobody, if there's an opinion based question, please be assured that you won't be penalized for your opinion unless it is a absolutely extremist kind of ridiculous interpretation. But if suppose on farm laws there's a question, now there'll be some people like me who will support farm laws. There'll be some people, some amongst you also, who will oppose the farm laws. Now both of us are entitled to our opinions, you know and as long as we can say why we have that opinion, and those reasons we give are logical and correctly stated, so basically no opinion is right or wrong, as long as that opinion is supported by valid arguments and that position is defended. It's like a debate. So when you go to a debating forum, the same thing happens. There are people who are for the motion, people who are against the motion, and in the house also people have two opinions. There is no right opinion as such.
Thank you, sir, for the incredible insights.
So are we winding up?
Sir, just one more
We
question.
do.
So, Shri Shendu Mitra has a question: how to prepare for current affairs in sports because suddenly UPSC asked three questions in prelims 2021. This may
you
be the
know,
last question, sir.
um, most of us, even today, I don't need to prepare for current affairs on sports, because that's the page I read first in newspapers. So when my newspaper comes home, whether it's Times of India, whether it's Indian Express, so Times of India second last page, Indian Express last page is the first page I read. So basically, as I said, it depends on your interest, your curiosity. You should know what's happening. You know who won what, who lost what series. So again, in sports, please remember that likelihood of any question being asked in cricket is low, because every Indian seems to be a cricketer and knows a lot about cricket. But other for example, uh, you know. How many gold medals has India won in Olympics? Individual. That's a good question to ask, because that's rare. That's a rare event. That how many individual gold medals has India won in Olympics? And that you should know. Neeraj Chopra won the gold medal this year. So you should be curious enough to ask yourselves how many gold medals has India won in individual events. And if you look at any net source, they'll tell you that. They'll tell you exactly who won it in which year. All right. So it's Abhinav Bindra, of course, but they'll tell you. So point is that it depends on you really, how much you read, how much you're interested, how much you follow, and whether you have a knack for looking at the right thing. Cricket. A question on cricket is very very unlikely, unless something really major or dramatic happens. Very unlikely.
Thank you, sir, for your incredible time, and we hope that students and all the participants have an incredible insights from you. Sir, any closing remarks would you like to give for today's session?
Well, as I said, that knowledge is never wasted. Huh? Please remember that. So don't ever think that you are wasting time. कि ये सवाल क्वेश्चन एग्जाम में तो आएगा नहीं. Why am I wasting time? ठीक है. Sometimes you will read things which will not come in exam, but uh, knowledge is always valuable. And as I pointed out, that if it doesn't come directly in your GSM paper, it might crop up in the interview. If it doesn't come in your interview, at least you are always respected, or you are good company in a drawing room when you meet with people, with friends. People recognize your worth as a man who's aware of the world around him or her. So nobody, you are not a very interesting person if you are ignorant. You're not a very interesting person if you know only your subject. You're an interesting person if you are, a bit eclectic, if you are, a bit of a polymath, that you know a little about a lot of things, and of course you know your subject very well. But other than your subject, you know little about various other things, and you take an interest in them also. So your subject may well be history, but you understand science. You know what science is happening. That you may never have played a sport in your life, which is unfortunate, but at least you take interest in what's happening on the sports field. And you might be that who's the last medal winner who's a para athletics in India, things like that. Who are the para athletes who won the Padma award this year. So basically you make for a much more interesting conversationist also. So no knowledge is wasted, and please read. Please, most of today's generation has become so addicted to snippets and shorts that they are forgetting reading. Reading is the ultimate knowledge. Newspapers will give you authentic information. Snippets you can't. Social media you can't guarantee information is authentic. Newspapers will hardly fault on authenticity, almost never ever. So please read magazines, please read books. Even reading books will give you knowledge, and so as long as you are you spend a few hours a day on reading, I can tell you that you will really be rewarded for it in one way or the other, directly or indirectly. You will always be rewarded for it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to all the participants for joining.
Okay, thanks. Bye bye. And best of luck for all the students who are taking the exam this year. I wish them